Greetings, dear alumni. My name is Anna Alexandrova. I'm a reader in philosophy of science and a fellow of King's College. So warm greetings to you, to those of you who I have had the pleasure to teach, and to those of you who tuned in, even though I haven't taught you. I have a few slides to get our conversation going, but let me clarify first what it's about. My guiding question is, can science really tell us how to live well? And let's be clear that this is not a conversation about whether science has been good for humanity all in all. And this is not a talk about whether the life-saving vaccines balance out with murderous weapons. That's not what it's about. I'm interested in whether science can help us to live happier lives beyond whatever material goods and life-saving technologies it can provide. For the past 20 years, I've been thinking about what I've been calling sciences of well-being, which is a relatively new field in the social and medical sciences, especially psychology and economics, that tries to study causes and effects of various positive emotions under various social conditions. So it's obviously a very attractive ideal because you would think that harnessing evidence for improving lives of individuals and communities is a good thing. So that's what we're talking about today. Let me introduce by formulating a dilemma. A dilemma is a well-worn philosophical tool that tells you that neither of the horns is particularly attractive. So what are the horns here? The first horn is we can rely on scientific evidence to arrange life for optimum well-being. And the second horn is that we rely on our own knowledge about our specific situation, either as individual or as communities, to go ahead. So the reason why this is a dilemma is because each approach has pluses and minuses. So on the plus side in science is that if we have large-scale evidence about how different social conditions bring about different positive or negative emotions, then we can correct all sorts of biases that we would have if we just looked at the familiar cases that we've encountered. We've corrected the biases, we've got larger samples, and we can also consider a far wider range of hypotheses with a lot more rigor than we might do in a regular life. On the other hand, you're relying on self, and I mean here not just self as individuals, but on the selves as communities. We really have some knowledge as communities about what sort of specific situation we're facing, what is special about where we are, and how we differ from other situations that would have been in that large sample that the scientific study provides. And most importantly, doing it ourselves also lets us keep what some philosophers call authenticity, which is living a life that is genuinely ours. So what are the ways out of this dilemma? I mean, it is obvious that the truth is somewhere in between, to have a little bit of science and a little bit of authentic thinking for ourselves. But that's easy to say. It's harder to specify exactly what that third way is. So let me tell you more. The sort of sciences that have been trying to accomplish what I'm describing, you might have heard about them as hedonic psychology, sciences of well-being, science of well-being, sciences of subjective well-being, positive psychology, etc. So there are different versions of it. Here's the individual version. the strand that tries to tell individuals how to improve their lives. So that's known as positive psychology. You would have seen lots and lots of books about, a new approach to getting your life, the life that you want, getting yourself on track, on the happiness track, etc. So that's for individuals. Whereas for communities, the sciences of well-being, what they've got to offer is various procedures for well-being-based policy making. So here is a very recent UK publication. Then there is the OECD guidelines for measurement of subjective well-being. Then there is the very famous report sponsored by the French government about how to properly measure progress. And other guidelines about how to assemble well-being statistics. So all in all, these are the two strands, the individual strand and the social strand. So let's see what they each offer you in terms of what you can do. So what science of well-being has to offer to individuals, that is positive psychology, is at this point, it's a fairly settled library. You might have come across it. It comes down mostly to just training yourself to have a positive outlook and optimism that enables you to meet really, difficult, whatever slings and arrows the life sends at you. It gives you that precious resilience that lots of people talk about. And to do that, you can do various types of cognitive behavioral therapy. If you are depressed or anxious, you can do gratefulness exercises. Just write down every day things that you're grateful for. There's all sorts of positive evidence on the side of pro-social behavior. That means sort of volunteering and fostering your relationships. And of course, there's mindfulness meditation to undergird your ability to appreciate just good things in life as they happen to you, rather than let them slip by and such that you're too busy to pay attention to them. So these are all the good things that you would have had if you are as an individual going to try and pay attention to this science. What about for communities? Well, for communities, the main first step is to start measuring reported well-being rather than gross domestic product or other conventional indicators of progress. So that is a step that is probably now taken in most industrialized countries. Official government statistics about various aspects of reported well-being, such as life satisfaction, reported happiness, positive emotions, perceptions of meaningfulness, things like that. After that, once you've collected the statistics, you can do the evaluation of policies on the basis of that. And the hope is that these statistics will help you to invest in policies that maximize the reported well-being, especially when it can be done better than in other ways. So everybody knows how harmful at this point unemployment is for subjective well-being. So that is always the first policy that well-being sciences, well-being advocates say to target. And then green spaces, mental health provision. You might have heard of an approach called social prescribing, which is a way of connecting at the, say, local council level, people with those resources of positive psychology so that they can go and make themselves happier and more resilient. And of course, you just could undertake to teach positive psychology at schools, work, prison, have kids meditate, have prisoners look at the bright side, though that does sound a bit creepy, to be honest. Anyway, there are lots of things you can do, and some of them can be more attractive than others. The point is whether these are all good approaches. What is the problem with them? So I myself, I've been an advocate and a very big fan and a contributor to the science of well-being, but I want to introduce the idea of sciencing well-being, and that means approaching well-being as ultimately a technical puzzle to resolve using the goals of science. And I do think that there are lots and lots of problems with that kind of sciencing. So for individuals, the problem is that basically the evidence base isn't that great. You will all these interventions would have been tested with all sorts of university student audiences or some other wider audiences, but the effect sizes they'll detect aren't that great, and there will be all sorts of reasons to be cautious about these results, given what we know about how hard it is to replicate scientific findings, especially in psychology and other social sciences. Moreover, the other problem is that, let me just summarize it as value judgments may not fit your own. This is the idea that any time you measure a positive psychology intervention, you make a judgment about what's good for people and what is a really important value. Is it very important for them to be satisfied with their lives? Well, as individuals, we've got lots of values that we are constantly juggling. We want to be successful, we want to be happy, we want to be good to others, we want to be authentic, we want to be fabulous in all sorts of ways. Juggling these, there is no reason for you to think that the scientist would have successfully juggled those value judgments and those conflicts for you. So in fact, they will more often than not adopt very simplistic definitions of well-being, because those are the definitions that are measurable, right? And they will probably not account for the conflict with other values that you may have. What about for societies? What's wrong with sciencing well-being for societies? The evidence base isn't that great again, and there is, again, a value gap between experts and populations. So what the experts might say is good for the expert would have validated life satisfaction as a measure. The expert says life satisfaction is what the policy should be maximizing, and that might not fit what a given community endorses. The given community filled out the questionnaire because they were never asked whether that's the right questionnaire to use in their case. And then the expert advisor to government says, well, people want whatever maximizes their life satisfaction. No, it doesn't follow. People have not been consulted, right? So the sort of gaps between values of experts and values of populations is not really escapable. And the sort of sciencing that I see happening a lot in the UK, for example, is very top-down and anti-democratic. So, it's not like communities are engaged to think about what would make their lives better. Rather, it's that communities fill out questionnaires, and then the experts tell them what are the policies that at the smallest cost bring about highest life satisfaction. Quite apart from being very top-down, this approach, of course, makes no room for rights and justice, and to take it to an extreme case, you probably wouldn't want to test, whether police brutality is an appropriate approach to policing, say, minority communities. because, on the basis of whether or not it raises life satisfaction. No, the conversation should be there about justice and grievances, not about life satisfaction, or at least not only about life satisfaction. So this is what's wrong with sciencing. But what to do then? So, and this is my last slide. I think what to do is, the first thing is to start with scientific recognition that scientific evidence will typically supply data about the relationship of some aspect of well-being and some factor in a given sample. And that's what it will supply. And then the hard work is figuring out the relevance of that particular evidence for our own case. So if you're an individual, you should ask, is this aspect that these scientists were able to measure an important part of my well-being? Should it be? Does it conflict with other things I value? And is the evidence from this sample appropriate given my situation? And communities should be asking, how does this aspect of well-being relate to other things that we value? And does investing in it override other important interests? And most importantly, is the decision to pursue it politically legitimate? There is no getting out of the hard work of getting people on board. And that, science is not going to help you there. It's hard work of mutual respect and politics and inclusive conversation. That's what you need there. So all in all, to take stock, I am not aiming at all my shots at the science of well-being. I am its advocate and its contributor and its greatest fan. My aim is at technocratic solutions sort of mentality. Well-being science is going to be only one input into the decision-making. And the problem with technocracy is that it reduces the moral and political problems into technical ones, it turns them into technical ones, and that never works, and that shouldn't work in a democracy. So all this is to say that there is no escaping deliberation and politics, because they are instead heart of the matter. And this is going to be it from me. And I will stop now. I'll drink some water, and I look forward to reading the questions that you have kindly started sending. Can religious faith be more helpful than science in how to live well, despite their parents different in magisteria? I mean, Garth, this is a great question. I myself am not a believer, and nevertheless, I think it would be wrong to answer this question in any way other than yes. Of course it can be, right? The sort of social network that being a member of a faith can provide, and the sort of support that it can provide has been a source of great comfort to lots of people. I mean, I can't, and there is some evidence as well that it is linked with subjective well-being. So in a way, an advocate of positive psychology will tell you that they're not at tension at all, that there is no difference in magisteria. So because we have evidence that people who participate in religious practices are happier. But again, that is, I think it would be really wrong to decide to become a member of religion on that basis alone, right? There would be something really inauthentic about that decision. So yes, in the answer to your question, but it's complicated. Anonymous attendee is asking, isn't training in mindfulness and having positive outlook open to self-delusion? Absolutely. So that's one of the problems that some recent scholarship about mindfulness and indeed cognitive behavioral therapy is exposing. A PhD student that I had the honor to supervise, called Sahanika Ratnayaki, has written about how what counts as unhelpful thoughts in cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness is just thoughts that make you unhappy, which means the assumption is that you can never have a good reason for having negative thoughts, but that's clearly not right. So that's the self-delusion bit that you're mentioning. I agree very much with it. So as helpful as it is, then yeah, it's important to open the black box that positive psychology is. And then also, aren't metrics of well-being inevitably subjective? Perhaps they need to be. Yes, they are inevitably subjective, and they do need to be. That is a feature, not a bug, because the subjectivity there, well, different senses of subjectivity, if the subjectivity is something that captures the personal point of view, that's exactly what you want to be capturing, right? Are you in effect critiquing all science that it can only focus on what is measurable and so must fall short of explaining some of the most important aspects of what it means to be human, spirituality? Thank you so much, Larry, for your question. Well, yes and no. So look, the development of science is a development of trying to measure things that are unmeasurable. So it's not like it's not like well-being is very distinctive here. Science have had to find ways of measuring light, even though it seemed like a fantastically subjective phenomenon. So it is, science is always pushing boundaries, trying to find phenomena that we didn't measure before, trying to redefine it into something measurable, and trying to speak about that phenomenon, trying to enter into that conversation. And that's a really good thing. And I don't think it would be fair to criticize science at not getting at something that it isn't, that may not be possible to get at, right? That is, let us give science as much possibility at applying their methods to fields that didn't seem like they were areas of science. I'm all for it. I'm all in favor of that. How about focusing, Larry again, how about focusing on wisdom instead of scientific knowledge, or as well? Well, I do think that wisdom is the bit where the personal deliberation enters, and also inclusive politics. So that's exactly what I want to be part of the sciences of well-being. The problem is that it is often treated as, oh, well, yes, of course, you do need the good judgment about how to apply the results, but we're just not going to talk about how to implement those good judgments, because that's outside science. That's what I'm against. Can science help us live longer? Let me leave that question for probably some biology colleagues and medicine colleagues that are speaking in this festival. Doesn't the assisted dying issue concern tensions between individual and social perspective? Definitely, very much so. Can you, Garth, I'm not sure what BDT is as opposed to CDT, so maybe you could edit your question. Do you think prolonging life through scientific and technological improvements can have negative impact on the mental health, mental well-being of older people? Well, yes. I suppose I haven't studied the new trend of trying to prolong lives as much as possible. And I think at some point, scientists of mental health will arrive and will arrive to that field. Let's just wait. Is not any kind of proposals. So that's from Jürgen Ivanis. Thank you, from Vienna, Austria. Very greetings. It is not not any kind of proposals from science of well-being to individuals or community not always a look back to point which are not running well, build the basis, the shape of well-being in future. Maybe you could reformulate the question. I'm not quite getting it at the moment. Sorry. Carol Maguire, thank you for your questions. Would you think that adding human rights to the well-being agenda would alter the apolitical and technical focus? Yeah, that's a really great question. So every now and then it is, Carol. Every now and then people adopt this incredibly wide and incredibly ambitious definition of well-being as living well, right? In general, all things considered, you know, for the humanity, for the future of humanity, for the environment, and that means also living respectfully and respecting human rights. I mean, yes, and then the happiness economist will come and always ask you, well, it's nice that you've added this, but I got no measurement procedures connected to this. So you have made well-being into something indeed much more inclusive, but it's not clear that I am now able to say anything about it. So that's also the dilemma that we face. We've got a tension between you know, trying to adopt an incredibly ambitious definition of well-being and trying to adopt one that's actually manageable and knowable. You know, my favorite example of such a tension is that the World Health Organization defines health as ability to live life and achieve one's true potential, not just to have physical health. Can you imagine how ambitious that is and how incredibly demanding it is on that definition? Most of us are not healthy. So that definition was adopted just as a slogan, right? But it doesn't mean that it makes the work any easier. Thank you for the note about Willoughby Brighton studying problematic aspects of meditation. I'll have a look into it. Do you think new paradigms are needed to investigate this realm? Yeah, absolutely. So the new paradigm that I'm interested in is influenced by the movement of citizen science and public participation in science. And that is when you involve members of the public at every stage of scientific inquiry, not just gathering data that you already decided need to be gathered, but also developing what data needs to be gathered and analyzing them and drawing conclusions from them. So, and that of course goes well with the rise of participatory politics that political theorists are talking about. So if we bring those two movements together, where we have communities run well-being research and use deliberative and participatory methods for implementing them, that I think is the real new dawn, because some of my economist colleagues like to say that the new dawn is implement life satisfaction as the new quantity in the treasury, as you know, as distinct from all the quantity of GDP. Not that I'm a fan of conventional cost-benefit analysis, but I think what they're proposing now is even worse. So the new dawn is participation, in my view. Lorraine, thank you for a great question about the value in the NHS of investing in digital apps that have been clinically trialed and showed to improve aspects of well-being, empowering or distracting. So I think that's still up for grabs, right? So some of the, I mean, if a well-being app can help you, I don't know, do more exercise and take more time to do your meditation every day, it's hard to see how it could do a lot of harm. But here's how, right? It could do a lot of harm if we start investing too much expectations in those apps, and if we start replacing human contact and availability of social care using that. So that could be the danger. How do you approach attaining well-being yourself? Thank you for this question. It is, I definitely do not think of myself as a well-being guru. I think it's extremely problematic that some of the colleagues in positive psychology to represent themselves as such. My life is a constant conflict and juggling of all of my duties, a duty as a mom, a duty as a partner, a duty as a teacher, a duty as a colleague, and finally that sort of long-standing, big human conditions type of question of how do I spend the rest of my life so as to be happy with what I've done. There is no solution other than leave space for doing things that I think are really important. That's what I find most difficult at this point in my career and this point in my life, making space and not letting my work and my everyday distract me from doing what I really believe in. And I don't think there is any recipe for getting this done other than blocking time in the calendar to sit down with myself and take stock. Are we measuring the wrong things in the main, in the wellness domain? I don't think we're measuring necessarily the wrong things. We're measuring plenty of good things. I mean, I think even life satisfaction is a nice quantity to measure because it's just such an all-purpose tool. I think measures of senses of anxiety are extremely important, and senses of meaningfulness and positive emotions. No, I think, well, of course, I'd like also other measures. I'd like measures of engagement and kind of the emotional state that you are going along with life. So there's a lot of improvement there, but I do think that existing measures, as limited as they are still a fantastically good thing. Let me see. Yeah, let me just take some water and keep going with your wonderful questions. Really appreciate them coming. Margaret Moss, is it not important to look at the sciences of nutrition and toxicology? Look, thank you, Margaret. So I think the sciences of well-being have always tried to draw a boundary of what it is that they are trying to do that others, that is distinct from what other sciences are doing. So of course, you know, the bacteria in your gut are essential to your good life, you know, in some way or another, because, you know, they make you healthier, they make you able to do things. But I think it is fair enough for the sciences of well-being to concentrate on immediate features of people's environment and positive evaluation of various positive emotions. So that is what it's been doing well, and it's a fair enough of a specialization, even though in terms of causal history, of course, you know, a lot of health is, yeah, a lot of biological and medical factors will be important. Thank you, Deborah Enzenbacher. How might your research assess the delivery of pedagogy University of Cambridge. I do believe that my research, perhaps not immediately, the colleagues in the education faculty do a lot of related things on well-being at schools and at university. I myself only have this first-hand experience of helping students as director of study to navigate, incredibly challenging terrain that they're facing now with the pandemic and their anxiety about the loans they will need to be repaying and the economy. So my experience is mainly on the front line, and I'm not sure I apply my knowledge of well-being very much at that level, because at that level, what we need is, as I'm sure you probably remember, is just to show empathy and be there for students. I don't think I'm going to ask them to do gratefulness exercises at the end of their difficult day, though I might, who knows, good idea. Climate change, COVID, other global problems that threaten everyone's well-being. Could you comment on the macro aspect of the situation, please? Yeah. Thanks, Larry. It's very hard to, it is extremely hard to study the sciences of well-being in the context of problems that are looming and that are much, much bigger than that, or that seem much bigger. But no, I think I'm quite happy to carry on thinking about what it would mean to implement a people-centered science and policy making of well-being. I think it is fair enough to apply yourself where you're able, and if not, all aspects of my research can speak about well-being and climate change, I think that would be fine with me. It is hard enough to do what I do. Let me see. Got plenty more time, and I'll keep going. Do you agree that paramount in well-being is to love and to be loved? Well, yes, of course. No, positive psychology will not disagree. I mean, they've studied for ages the importance of connection and relationship for people who thrive. And then that's why the movement of getting people to volunteer is such a big part of the collective, the social side of sciences of well-being. It's all about fostering human connection, of course. Just still reading some of the questions. Yes, Jürgen, I do agree with you that sciences of well-being arise in order to address a certain problem, right? But they also frame themselves as being essentially not pathology focused, right? And but rather positive. So the challenge is to articulate what is the positive ideal rather than what is a way of just solving problems has always been at the heart of sciences of well-being. And I'm not always sure that it's been a good idea. It seems like a relief of suffering is fair enough of a goal rather than also promoting well-being. Perhaps that's far more ambitious. But for better or worse, that's the goal, and I still want to understand how to do it well. Carol Maguire is saying that UK government for Works and Department of Works and Pensions currently consulting about future policies towards disability and supporting ill health. And the most negotiable aspect of their work is at a level of basic income. Is this need always left out of discussions, well-being? Well, yes. So I'm not sure it is left out in the sense that there's a wide recognition of a certain bedrock access to livelihood that that is always necessary for well-being. It's just that the people who are pursuing well-being policy want to do more than that. And I think the importance of your question is that perhaps they shouldn't be. Perhaps there are certain basic things that aren't resolved at all. Of course, they will tell you that the basic things, such as income, will not have the effect that we want them to have, unless it is also undergirded by evidence about delivery on of positive emotions. It's a really good question. I guess I would agree that discussions of well-being aren't always focused on very specific challenges. That's why in my work I advocate this idea of mid-level theories of well-being that should be that should be formulated very context-specific to the kind of challenge that a person faces. So we need theory of well-being for life with chronic pain, or we need a theory of well-being for life with a specific kind of disability, rather than generic measures of well-being that I very much believe in. Thank you so much for your, and that's also the point of that the anonymous attendees just raised, is well-being research a luxury given number of humans struggling to survive each day? Absolutely, I do believe it is very often a luxury. And then the reply will always be, it's not a luxury because none of the basics that we would provide could be effective if we don't also have an overall flourishing in mind. I think that's a really live controversy, but I'm reporting. Great. So Roger Scruton, I teach, sorry, the question disappeared. I teach outdoor education and measure its benefit, including well-being for pupils. Effect size are not great, but qualitative evidence of benefit is very positive. How do you interpret this tension? I interpret this tension as good for qualitative evidence, because qualitative evidence is dismissed all too easily. And it is, I mean, I think if you teach outdoor education and you can eyeball its positive effect, then that is evidence. And it's very hard to know how to balance that evidence against the quantitative evidence studying overall relation between, say, life satisfaction and physical activity. But maybe that's the problem with those overall studies. Maybe they aren't measuring the right kind of well-being. And your gut feeling as an expert, as a producer of that kind of knowledge needs to be considered. So I'm a great believer in trusting a low-level local expertise about that. So maybe the effect sizes would be greater if there was a better measure. Let me see what else we've got. I'm not currently running activities regarding COVID and well-being, but it is a huge, big field of study. The Office of National Statistics has been monitoring the effect on people's emotions. During the pandemic, enormous rise in anxiety, and about, of course, the people's livelihoods, and a very justified rise. This is, colleagues are studying this very much. Of course they would. I think I have managed to get through most of your questions. And if there aren't many going through, and I've got 3 minutes left, let me just tell you that the current research I do with the Bennett Institute for Public Policy and the colleagues there, especially Mark Fabian and Diane Coyle, focuses very much on trying to devise new participatory methods for well-being science and well-being policy. We are interested in moving away from the social planner perspective, when well-being is done to people, to a citizen perspective. And we're trialing all sorts of actual events along those lines. So please sign up for that Twitter, Bennett Institute for Public Policy.